Hello and welcome. He is one of the brightest minds of his generation, a top-ranking foreign services officer with a successful career in India Inc., coming now into politics as a technocrat driving India's foreign policy. And for a lot of people watching on television and on social media at this time, Dr. S.Jaishankar is the kind of person you want shepherding India's interaction with the world, because that's what he's done his own life, and now he has the opportunity to do so with the political backing of the Prime Minister and the Bharatiya Janata Party. I want to welcome to the India Today Conclave South, India's Foreign Minister, Dr. Jaishankar. Dr. Jaishankar, it's terrific to have you with us, and thank you so much. This is the first time you're joining us at the India Today Conclave, and we're very glad to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul. Great pleasure to be here, and vanakkam to everybody. I'm very pleased to join you. I wish I could have been there physically, but you would have noticed a few things were happening yesterday in Delhi. So,
you get asked questions on foreign affairs all the time. I want to start by asking you some political questions, Dr. Jaishankar, because even though you grew up in Delhi, your family traces its roots to Tamil Nadu. Your illustrious father spent his time in Tamil Nadu growing up. There's a big election happening in the state. As one of the key faces of your party coming from the state of Tamil Nadu, why is it that you believe the pitch is right for the BJP to spread its wings in the southern state of Tamil Nadu?
look, I think the BJP is, to use your words, spreading its wings, not just in Tamil Nadu, across the country, because in many ways it is the aspirational party. It is the party which reflects the mood and the, I would say, the socio-economic thinking of the country, the political thinking of the country. And if you're doing it across the entire country, then it's natural to do that in Tamil Nadu as well. But there are other reasons. And part of the reasons are that if you look at the last 6 years of the record of governance of the Narendra Modi government, that's a very powerful case for people to vote for it. If you look at the challenge of the COVID, which we have come through with enormous fortitude and discipline, I think a large part of it, you will admit, Rahul, is due to the trust and belief which the people of the entire country, including Tamil Nadu, had in the Prime Minister. And I would say it is a party where on matters which are important for Tamils, the BJP has stood up for on many of those matters, including issues pertaining to Sri Lanka. So whether it's foreign policy, whether it is the governance record, whether it is this huge trial by fire we have had of COVID, I think there's a very, very powerful case. And to that, I would add this, that if you look at the thinking of the BJP and the policies of the Modi government, you've actually had, for the first time in this country, people dedicated to creating a socially inclusive system. It's not just programs and initiatives. Whether Jan Dhan Yojana, whether it is the way the food was provided during the COVID, whether it's Ayushman Bharat. So we are making a welfareist society, and I think that's something which resonates very strongly in Tamil Nadu.
I've always wondered what it is like for you as a technocrat, career diplomat, after having been in so many different high commissions and embassies across the world, to come in and now be a politician, because being a politician is very different from being a diplomat, where things are very structured, they're in control. Here anybody can just show up and make demands on your time, have expectations. So give us a sneak peek into what it's been like for you to make the transition from being a career diplomat to being a full-time neta.
Well, look, I'd say this, Rahul. First of all, the life in diplomacy is less structured and less managed than I suspect you think it is. Because often you are out there, it's you and your embassy, your team. There isn't the kind of support system which government people in India typically are used to. So you react, you improvise, you adjust to your surroundings. And that, in a way, is a quality which has helped me as you move into political life. But having said that, I would tell you in all candor, you know, I've always been interested in politics. I grew up in a household which was very interested in politics. I saw politicians of that era come home, so you know, it all had an impact on you. I watched politics up front, but I can tell you, you know, what it takes to do the calling of politics, that's something of a totally different level. I would say really the politicians of this country put in so much that you don't know it until you actually are one of them. And I truly admire them for the effort and dedication that they put in. You know, like everything in life, you join it, you watch others, you make, you know, you sort of make it up as you go along. And you know, there are more experienced people from whom you learn. So it's a learning experience, and trust me, you know, if I'm still learning at my age, I'm very happy.
So what is it that you've learned about what it takes to be a successful politician? Because when people see you, they'll wonder, is there space for someone who's in corporate life or an entrepreneur coming in from the outside wanting to be a politician? So what did it take to make the transition? What kind of mental, physical changes that you had to make? You now dress differently from the way you did when we saw you as a diplomat in the US or in China. But that apart, what are the kind of changes that you had to make? And what would be your message to those who look at you and say, can I also, like Dr. Jaishankar, one day become a politician?
Well, look, I think in a way, politics should be for everybody. I mean, because, I mean, if you can be a chartered accountant and a politician, or a lawyer and a politician, or a social activist and a politician, I don't see why you cannot be as a diplomat and a politician, or a corporate person as a politician, or a worker and a politician. So, I mean, in a sense, I mean, what is politics? At the end of the day, it is an effort to really go out there, understand what people want, what the nation requires, and you kind of do your best. Now, in terms of, you know, now whether I'm doing well or not, that's not for me to say, that's for others to say. And after all, it's been less than 2 years in this particular way of life. But let me just say this, that look, when you know, being part of a process of change, I mean, everybody is, all the people of India are part of what is changing. But to be out there, you know, contributing to policies, making your inputs, you know, bringing something to the table out there and saying, okay, something big happened. Let's say we managed the COVID challenge. Now, to be part of a group of ministers who are working on the COVID challenge is I think, something which I will remember for the rest of my life. You know, at the end of the day, everybody wants to be remembered well. I mean, people like to say, yes, you know, there was this person, he made this difference. Some of it is that. And I would say, I mean, in a way, to me, it's all about your ability to adjust, to be able to be reasonable, to convince people of your point of view, to be a listener, to in a sense be not just have open doors but an open mind. And I quite, to be very honest, I'm quite enjoying it. You know, I find, I mean, a lot, I mean, people longer in politics than me have told me that, look, it's all about interacting with people. You get your energy from them. I'm now realizing that's actually so.
Speaking of making a difference in the last 2 years, what do you think, Dr. Jaishankar, is the biggest difference you've been able to make to the manner in which India's foreign policy is run? What do you look back and say is your numero uno achievement?
You know, I think you're personalizing this too much, Rahul. You know, I would hesitate to say this is my achievement or this is the difference I've made. Yes, when I would talk to myself, I would say, sure, I mean, this is contribution I made because of some experience I had. I think it's been very much a team effort. It's a lot of what's happened. I assume you're talking of foreign policy here, has been really a larger effort led, guided by the vision of the Prime Minister. And, at the end of the day, the vision is that we in India must sort of, in a sense, regain our place in the world. We are an old civilization. We were a great economy. All of that is possible. And these are not dreams in a way. All of that is possible provided you do the right things at home, you build the right strengths, you take care of your people, you empower them, you skill them, you educate them, you give them jobs. So it comes as a holistic package. For me, the big learning has been that if you want a successful foreign policy, you have to get your act together at home. And so I've actually spent a lot of my time looking at economic issues, health issues, talking to my colleagues in education, skilling, etc. So it's been all of the government sense of the backing for foreign policy. That's been something which has been very, very useful.
Now, the biggest challenge on your watch has been handling the relationship with China, and we've come out of several months of extremely high hostilities in some sectors, eyeball to eyeball confrontation, the possibility of escalation. How stressful have the past few months been trying to manage the relationship with China, and were there times over the past few months towards, say, the end of August, the 29th, 30th of August, when you were sending troops up to capture heights above the Chinese positions, when you thought, hey, can India and China go to war? Will there be war while you're foreign minister? Did that thought cross you? How close were we to a possible military conflict?
Do I look stressed? So I assume from your smile, the answer
it is stressful. If you say you don't look stressed, I won't buy that.
No, look,
it is stressful. If you've got the kind of armaments and the kind of security personnel on the other side, anybody who's in any position of power in the national security architecture would be hugely stressed. It's only inevitable, sir.
Look, I grant you, we went through a very difficult period. I think we are still not past it. Okay, we've had disengagement in the most, the most close-up friction area. There are still some other areas to resolve, and that's something we've been very open about. Now, the fact is, somewhere in life, you have to understand that if the integrity and the sovereignty of a country is threatened, if you are part of the government and you are serious about your job, you will do what it takes to face up to the challenge. Now, we had belief in the military. We trusted them professionally to do what was required. Fortunately for the country, I think in the last 5 years, we had also improved the logistics in the border area. So I want to say a lot of what happened in 2020 would not have happened 5 years ago because the logistics were not in place. I think it was capabilities was another important factor. One example was the arrival of the Rafales at that point of time. So I think we addressed it with a fair deal of self-confidence and a sense that we have to stand our ground. We know it was very, very tough. I take my hats off to the military. So they did what they had to, but I would also say the political leadership, gave the kind of backing and support, and in a way I would say the leadership in a way to handle that situation. So that's, again, I want you to understand, as these are all going to be issues which this country has to address. As we get more powerful, as our capabilities grow, as our profile in the world rises, there will be challenges. challenges can come from neighbors, challenges can come from beyond, challenges can come from states, from non-states. So, life will be tough. I mean, I do not think we should have a sort of a very complacent, sanguine view of life. So, a lot of governance is to be prepared for tough days, and for tough days you need a strong leader, you need clear vision, you need great boldness, you need enormous commitment, and that is what we have today. And which, by the way, going back to your first question, I think the people of Tamil Nadu also need to appreciate that today as they cast their vote, that their future, like the rest of India, is more secure in the hands of a government which is led by BJP.
Handling the relationship with China is arguably not just your most important task, but also India's most important relationship. As India grows, as China grows and becomes even bigger, how do you see, in the context of China already bearing its military fangs, as it were, how do you see this relationship shape up over the next several months, from the swings on the banks of the Sabarmati to having tanks lined up against each other, now pulling back from the brink? How do you see this relationship go from here, Dr. Jaishankar?
Well, I would give you an answer in 2-3 different propositions. Okay? I mean, first of all, in the rise of China, we have what really after the Second World War is the rise of a potential global power. Okay? So, it is a phenomenal happening. Now, we happen to be located directly next to this global power. So, when a global power rises, it will have its repercussions, it will have its ripples, and we feel it directly. Now, we have problems, historical problems, boundary issues, other issues. So, the possibility of the impact of that on us is obviously quite significant. The second is with vis-a-vis a lot of countries, because we have risen, you can see new balances, new equilibriums happening vis-a-vis India and much of the world. But because China has risen very much faster in the same period, and a lot of that I would say are due to the less than ideal optimal policies of the past on our part. So, some of the rise of India has been lost on China. So, therefore, the challenge we are going to face is China is rising, India is rising, but this India has to stand firm and stand clearly in its interest and signal that, look, we respect your interests, but we also have interests which need to be respected. Now, in terms of the how do you sort of look at the ups and downs, the swings in the relationship? Now, obviously, when a relationship is doing well, we would respond positively. So, if you extend your hand, I am going to extend my hand too. But if you point a gun at me, I will point a gun at you. I mean, that's reasonable, that's logical. So, we want today, our message to the Chinese is very clear. Look, we want good relations. We will be the second and third largest economy in the world in the very near future. We are the most populous countries in the world. We are the two Asian civilizations which are, in a sense, regaining their place in the global order. But the future of our relationship, if you want to see progress, I need peace and tranquility on the border. I can't have tension in the border. I can't have the kind of issues I had in Galwan and then say, well, let's carry on with business in the rest of our relationship. That's unreal. So, I think we've been very, very clear to the Chinese that, if you want good relations, and on our side we do, then let's find a way of restoring peace and tranquility in the border areas. So, that is today the focus of our China policy.
Now, critics of your government will accuse Prime Minister Narendra Modi of having a very rose-tinted view of India's relationship with China and his personal ability to get China to change its policy or attitude towards India based on his supposed equation with President Xi Jinping. Do you think, like some prime ministers in the past, he got swayed with the optics at Xi'an or at Sabarmati, where he thought that because he and she had a personal equation, or at least it seemed, now I don't know, A, what's the equation currently? Obviously terribly frayed. How do you see it? And did Xi Jinping take our prime minister for a ride?
Look, I ask you a counter question. Does Narendra Modi look like a person wearing rose-tinted glasses? Ever? In any situation? I mean, come on. I mean, you may have had some other prime minister 50 years ago. So let's not, sort of make those untenable sort of comparisons. Okay? Look, I wasn't there at Wuhan when they had the first informal summit. I was there at the second one. These were, practical, pragmatic, tough conversations between leaders. And please understand, Rahul, today's diplomacy requires leaders to be engaged. The idea that somehow diplomacy is run by faceless bureaucrats, of which I was one till fairly recently, that somehow we do things on autopilots, on files, and these people wearing nice suits will work out everything and leaders will come there to bless a good outcome. That's not the way it works. But this is not a peculiarity of Prime Minister Modi or President Xi. Look at the world. You have today Germany, people say, yes, we have Chancellor Merkel. She's a strong chancellor. Japan says, yes, I had Prime Minister Abe. He was a strong prime minister. A lot of the debate in an American presidential election is what? That is the president strong enough to lead? So today leadership is very important. The person at the top has to take responsibility. The person at the top has to know what they are talking about, has to be tough and engaged. You can't leave it to the system saying, okay guys, you go figure out this problem and I'll come when something needs to be signed. That's not how diplomacy is done today. That's not how our interests are best advanced, and that's not the way this prime minister is. This prime minister is willing to lead from the front. If he wants us to pursue a policy, he will advocate it himself. If there's tough talking to do, he's prepared to do it himself. You've covered many of the earlier meetings. When we had a problem, under this prime minister, we've been very open about it. You remember, for example, this whole UN sanctioning of Pakistani terrorists. Now, in the old days, you would have brushed it under the carpet. Now, under this prime minister, we said, okay, listen, if you're not going to do it, we're going to vocally express our unhappiness. If somebody is sort of delaying, objective we are interested in, it could be nuclear supplies group, we will speak our mind. This idea that I must keep quiet when my interests are impacted, and that every meeting is somehow some kind of a bonhomie exercise. That's the record doesn't bear it out. Meetings are tough. You have no idea of the kind of preparation that goes into these summits. The sort of the issues which the prime minister has to kind of get into in detail.
Now, there was a meeting just yesterday between the leaders of the Quad countries, the United States, Japan, India, Australia. We saw the optics on the outside. How do you see the Quad play itself out? Now that, the concern the world has is, now that India and China have pulled back a little bit from the brink, will India be less interested in forging a stronger Quad than we were at the height of escalation? How was the meeting yesterday? What's your take on it? How do you see the Quad evolve from here?
Look, first the chemistry, I think the mood, whatever you asked me, inside was just as warm as it was outside. I was watching it from inside. Because the Prime Minister, knows President Biden from the time Biden was Vice President. He has a very good equation with Prime Minister Morrison. He had a phone call just a very good phone call just before the summit with Prime Minister Suga. So there was already a high degree of comfort and familiarity. But your issue about the Quad and how does it relate to what happened between India and China, I want to make 2 points here. First of all, the Quad is for something. It is not against somebody. Okay? So what is it for? Today, I mean, there is a pandemic. Okay? There is a global search for vaccines. Does it not make sense for those who want to come together to produce more vaccines and make it more available to do that? Climate change. Okay? If a whole set of countries feel, okay, let's try and work together. Maritime security, connectivity, I can give you a long list. So there are, technology, resilient supply chains. So there are a whole lot of issues on which countries today want to come to work and work together. If these countries happen to be democratic countries, market economies, pluralistic societies, it makes it easier. So, I mean, you would also, if you wanted to sit and work with somebody, what would all of you do? I mean, all of you would find people with whom you're comfortable and work together. So, first of all, let's be clear, the Quad has a purpose of its own, it has a logic of its own, it has a driver of its own, it has a positive agenda, and you saw that agenda laid out yesterday. Okay? The second issue. Look, we discovered this not in 2020 when we had problems with China. But there was a Quad meeting in 2017 at a foreign secretary level. I went there when I was foreign secretary. We had a Quad meeting in 2019 as foreign ministers. I went there as foreign minister. So at that time we didn't have a situation in Ladakh. So I think this idea that something is happening in Ladakh, so Quad will go up and down, and India's mindset is so tactical. Look, this is a very strategic government. It's a very strategic prime minister. You don't kind of put your hand up and say, okay, which way is the wind blowing and that's the way I'm going. I think we have a very clear sense what are our interests, what is our strategy, what are our long-term prospects, and Quad is part of that.
One of your challenges, Dr. Jaishankar, is to manage India's image internationally. And over the past few days, we've seen multiple international reports which seem to suggest that India's standing is now, being clouded. For example, Freedom House put out a report which demoted India's freedom score from free to partly free, saying rights and civil liberties have been eroding since Prime Minister Modi came to power. The 5th annual democracy report by Sweden's VDEM Institute downgraded India from India's largest democracy to being an electoral autocracy. How do you see this play itself out in the context of how India is being perceived by the world, and these new reports which seem to say that at least these institutions are now taking a negative view of what's happening in our country?
You use the dichotomy of democracy and autocracy. You want the truthful answer? It's hypocrisy. Okay? It's hypocrisy because you have a set of self-appointed custodians of the world who find it very difficult to stomach that somebody in India is not looking for their approval, is not willing to play the game they want it to be played. So they invent their rules, their parameters, pass their judgments, and then make out as though this is some kind of global exercise. So I ask you, I mean, you are talking of a report from Sweden, a report from the United States. Okay? We are supposed to be the nationalist, what do you always see? BJP, Hindu nationalist government, okay? Hindu nationalist party. So let's talk nationalism. Okay? We are the nationalist guys. We have given vaccines to 70 countries in the world. So tell me, the internationalist countries, how many vaccines have they given? I mean, which one of these countries has said, while I'm doing my people, I will also do people outside who need it as much as my people do? So suddenly where are these people when it comes to that? We are supposed to be shrinking civil rights because of apparently our mindset. Now again, look at the politics of these places. I mean, whatever you might say, I mean, in this country nobody questions an election. Can you say that in those countries? So, and look at beliefs. I mean, yes, I mean, all of us are entitled to our beliefs, our faiths, our values, etc. But I don't put my hand on a religious book when I take my oath of office. Guess which country does? So I think we need to enough of those homilies. I'm quite self-assured. I don't need certification from outside. Certainly not from people who clearly have an agenda to drive. So I would say thanks a lot.
One of the things, sir, that happened on your watch which intrigued me was the bombastic response from the Ministry of External Affairs to tweets put out by climate activist Greta Thunberg and pop star Rihanna. And I always wondered, with somebody with your sophistication at the helm, why would we react in the way that we did? Would it not have been better to just ignore one pop star, one climate activist, rather than have the might of India's Ministry of External Affairs wanting to swat them down?
Well, I'm tempted to say, Rahul, if I had done that, you would have had no news for the next 3 days. So I probably did you a favor. But more seriously, look, you've got to understand what this is about, okay? I mean, it's not necessarily individual A or B or activist C or whatever it is. You actually had people calling on social media saying, go demonstrate outside Indian embassies. Okay. Okay, to you sitting in Delhi, it's not a big deal. It seems like exercise of political rights. I am responsible for my embassies. You remember those pictures coming out of London when our High Commission was being attacked? The mobs which were surging. What do you think it was like to be inside the High Commission? Okay. I am looking today, at Canada. Okay. There are supposedly COVID rules in Canada which says, not more than X number of people should gather. Now, for some reason, they are not being applied outside my High Commission and consulates. So they regularly get, crowds outside, clearly with a view to harass and intimidate them. I have people my diplomats get phone calls, sometimes threatening phone calls. There are people who are seen as sympathetic or associated with us who are being intimidated. So look, let's not pretend this was such an innocent exercise of nice people who are sort of having a debate. I mean, these are practical consequences on the ground. And this I will tell you, I mean, if I feel my people, my embassies, my high commissions are being pressurized, of course I will react. What kind of minister would I be if I didn't?
One of the things that happened recently, which was very interesting, is that in the middle of what seemed like a complete deadlock between India and Pakistan, the Director General Military Operations on both sides announced that there would be a reiteration of a previous ceasefire. This on the back of a lot of pounding of artillery shells and mortars in the bordering villages around the line of control. Are we seeing the first steps towards a tentative thaw and a resumption of our fractured relationship with Pakistan, Dr. Jaishankar?
Look, honest answer, Rahul, I don't know as yet, because it is certainly a very positive step that the DGMOs were able to agree that the line of control and the IB would be sort of free of firing. Free of firing means that there won't be people crossing over from the other side, because typically the reason why there's firing is infiltrators come, often they're given covering fire under which they cross. So if there is no infiltration and no covering fire and therefore no counter fire, that assumes that the LOC and the IB are more secure, and there are ways of verifying that. That is certainly a positive step. Now, where that positive step goes, I mean, who knows? I mean, with Pakistan, all of us know, there have been, I mean, not every sort of positive direction unfolds without its complications. So at this moment, beyond that, I think it would be premature of me to voice anything more than that.
Was this done at a political level as well? It's not just the DGMOs. There's been some reports in the media about meetings between the national security advisors on both sides, definitely calls between the two NSAs. And is this, because that's the perception globally, is this an attempt being made because of increased hostility and tension with China, where we don't want to face the specter of two-front hostilities, and therefore India now attempting to dial down with Pakistan, something which even the Pakistanis seem to be interested in at this moment? So is this in some way linked to what's happening on the China border?
I think people have been reading too many sort of strategic books and fantasizing on two fronts and three fronts and whatever. Look, Pakistan is a neighbor, okay? Everybody wants to get along with their neighbor, provided the neighbor is a normal neighbor, okay? Now, if the neighbor is moving towards normalcy, if the neighbor says, okay, from now onwards, there will not be terrorists from my side crossing over, so to speak. I mean, why would you not welcome this? I mean, suppose right now we were not having the situation in eastern Ladakh. Do you think if I had that possibility with Pakistan, I would not take it? I mean, I don't see the correlation between the two at all. I mean, I think our relationship with Pakistan has a logic of its own.
You know, this is the India Today Conclave South, and in Chennai, as across all of Tamil Nadu, there's a lot of interest in our relationship with Sri Lanka. And just over the past few weeks, there have been multiple developments. On the 1st of February, Sri Lanka abruptly scrapped the Colombo Port East Container Terminal project with India and Japan. This after President Gotabaya Rajapakse himself had announced this project on the 13th of January. So what changed between the 13th of January, the 1st of February? How did this happen? At the same time, they're also offering new projects to the Chinese. A renewable energy project being offered in 3 coasts off the coast of Jaffna, which is just about 50 kilometers from Rameshwaram in Tamil Nadu. So a lot of interest in how you perceive our relationship with Sri Lanka at this time, and what do you think is going on?
Look, there are 2 important pillars of our relationship. One, of course, is the bilateral pillar, which is what happens between us, meaning the governments of India and Sri Lanka, and some of what you have spoken about is in that domain. Then there is the the issue of the ethnic issue and the interest that India has had, and that's been a long-standing issue as well. Your question mainly focuses on the first, though there are obviously concerns on the second as well. Now, on that, what I want to say is there was an intergovernmental agreement between India, Sri Lanka and Japan, okay, on the East Container Terminal. Then the Sri Lankan government told us that they want to shift to an investor-driven model, which is they want to approach investors in India and Japan and see if they can negotiate with the investors, because they didn't want to take a loan. They wanted investors to invest in the port. That was their call. So after that, they have been directly talking to the investors, and the Sri Lankan government has taken the call that they would prefer to have the investor in the western container terminal rather than the eastern container terminal. That's their call. I may have a view on it, but it is their call. So that is what is happening. But otherwise, I would say it is our endeavor. I mean, we do projects in Sri Lanka. We do a lot of business in Sri Lanka. Trade is good there. overall, if you ask me, is the economic environment, is business, well, that I would say has been decent. I mean, clearly there are still some projects to be done, etc. But I wouldn't read, you know, too much into you know, this as a sort of a strategic signaling, if you know what I mean.
You know, I want to conclude by asking you about what is one of the biggest achievements of India as a country, our ability to produce vaccines, which now through your vaccine Maitri you are distributing across the world. How much goodwill do you think this is one India? Is it something that, you know, really helps, especially in comparison with China? Chinese vaccines in many countries not being as favorably received as ours. How do you see it having played out so far in the context of many in India thinking, sir, mujhe to vaccine lagi nahi, aap jaake sabko dete phir rahe ho. We are all waiting for our vaccine. So how is this playing itself out?
Okay. Look, I'll come to that briefly, but I just wanted to finish up my Sri Lanka point as well, because as I said, there are two aspects to the Sri Lanka question. The other aspect is the question of the Tamils in Sri Lanka. Now, you know that we have always stood for equality, justice, for peace, and for the development of Tamils in Sri Lanka, and that was guaranteed by devolution through the 13th Amendment. But what, you know, this obviously the implementation of that is a source of concern, and in Tamil Nadu there is, you know, there is a lot of interest both on the situation of Tamils in Sri Lanka as well as the fishermen's problem. So I think, Rahul, these are both very live issues out there. I mean, you may not have sort of focused on it, but I'm telling you as someone who deals with this issue, when I look at the kind of feedback I get from Tamil Nadu, these are two very important issues. So I want to make 2 points here. You know, it's right we are concerned with what is happening with the Tamils out there. It is natural also because there is a kinship of language. But it is what people should understand in Tamil Nadu and elsewhere. You know, this should be a genuine feeling. It should not be a feeling for Tamils 1 month before election, which then ends 1 day after election. And sometimes you have that feeling, you know, that the Tamil issue in Sri Lanka spikes when elections are near and then sort of trails down. I think it's important to see who does what every day of the year, you know, that who is working 365 days a year in support of something which is right. Because again, I go back to your first question when you ask me why should the people of Tamil Nadu support the BJP. Because I do think that the BJP and Prime Minister Modi's government have been very strong, very firm, very clear and very principled on this issue. And it's very interesting, think about it. You know, Narendra Modi is the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Jaffna. Ask yourself why. In 70 years, no other Indian Prime Minister went to Jaffna. Now, okay, you can say fine, there were times which were difficult, etc. Narendra Modi was the first Prime Minister who said, look, we should have flights to Jaffna. The people there should be connected to people in Tamil Nadu. Now, I mean, it's when it happens, it looks obvious to everybody, but it didn't happen before. So when it comes to practical stuff, building hospitals, we built hospitals in Babunia, we built hospitals in the plantation area, building houses. I mean, this Prime Minister went and actually personally handed over houses in the northern province to people. So the issue there, you know, what I do want to say, whether it's foreign policy, whether it's governance, whether it's politics, at the end of the day, I think people should judge us by sincerity. Who says what, but who does what. Sometimes those who do don't always speak, you know, they are perhaps more bashful than they should be. But I think this message needs to come through very, very clearly. Who's standing up for whom? Now, your vaccine question. Look, I don't think it's an either or, okay? we have a certain program of vaccination. I am part of the group of ministers myself. The vaccination program, we always said, make sure there are enough vaccines at home. Once there are vaccines at home, also ensure that contract commitments are kept, that your neighbors are looked after. Small vulnerable countries find vaccines accessible, affordable. So to me, it isn't that I am taking your vaccine and giving it to somebody outside there, Rahul. Your vaccine would come when I hesitate to figure out your age here, but I know for sure you're below 60. So when the below 60s come, your turn will come. But when your turn comes, I'm sure there'll be vaccines.
No, this I just said as an aside. I think most people who are watching would actually just be delighted with the fact that we're not just able to help our own people, the health workers, the vulnerable, the older people, but also being the vaccine factory of the world, help out other countries in need as well. And this is what Vasudev Kutumbakam is all about. So I want to thank you dearly for having joined us. Always engaging, talking to you, super sharp answers as always. Thank you so much, Dr. Jaishankar, for joining us at the India Today Conclave South. We wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure. That's
Hello everyone, this is Rahul Kamal here. Hope you enjoyed this video. For the latest news and analysis, like and subscribe the India Today YouTube channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to stay updated.